Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Michael Schroeder, and I'm really excited to have you guys listen to this show today. Really excited for it, obviously. We're going to go into some NBA and women's basketball topics. I'm going to talk about why Nikola Jokic deserves to be the MVP, what makes Zion Williamson so special, why Mulkey's hire for LSU is going to turn the program around, and I'm going to talk about who I think the biggest disappointment in the NBA has been so far during this season. So actually, there's only 11 games left in the NBA season. So basically, who's been the biggest disappointment? So to start off with the show, we're going to have a great segment talking about why Nikola Jokic deserves to be the MVP. Right, I think he should be deserved to be the MVP. And a lot of people are projecting that's how it's going to be. And there are candidates such as Joel Embiid or Steph Curry or Chris Paul or Giannis. Those are basically kind of, in my opinion, the top 5 candidates. But the reason why Nikola Jokic deserves MVP, I'm going to break it down for you guys. And to start off with, just think about overall impact, right? That's what the MVP is, most valuable, right? The way it's judged in the NBA is based on a guy being on a winning team and having incredible stats, right? That's why Russell Westbrook got it. It's why Giannis has gotten the last 2 years, because the Bucks are the number 1 seed in the East and he had unbelievable stats. Now, I'm looking at the statistical categories, right? So Nikola Jokic is 10th in scoring, 9th in rebounding, and 7th in assists at this moment in time. That's impact. And if you want to disagree with me, that's fine. But he's got a major impact on the game. And the reason why that's so special is because of what he brings to the table, what he can do, what he does every night running the offense for Denver, and the fact that he also has become a dominant scorer. And from that point, he's been able to really get Denver over the top, and that's really allowed them to become a team that's a contender the last couple of years, but especially this year, where they've had guys in and out of the lineup a lot. He's been able to be that consistent figure of getting the guys involved, being a consistent scorer and rebounder. The Nuggets are 4th in the West, right? So again, people are looking at that and saying, why would you give it to a guy who's 4th in the West? Well, think about the Western Conference for a second here, guys. Think about it, right? I've expressed this many times on the segments and shows I do for the GSMC Basketball Podcast, and that's coming through the fact that the Western Conference is much tougher than the Eastern Conference, right? It just is. Dallas has the same record virtually as the Atlanta Hawks, and right now they're a 6th seed in the Western Conference. You look at Portland's the 7th seed. You look at Memphis, right? These teams have better records than the teams in the East. The East has gotten better where it's not necessarily like you have 3 or 4 teams with losing records making the playoffs. But I think if you look at the Western Conference, the talent's a little bit better out there, and it's harder to get high seeds. If it was Portland, who has CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard playing right now, would be able to be higher than a 7th seed and not be on a 6-game losing streak. So that's kind of where I go from there, right? And that's the reason why I look at this and say that that's a big factor into why that he should be in the MVP. Now, another reason, look, is they're winning still without Jamal Murray. They beat Memphis last night. Now, they did lose to the Warriors recently, but they've won the majority of their games without Jamal Murray, and they actually won last night without Monte Morris or Will Barton. Monte Morris and Will Barton both had hamstring issues that Will Barton's, I think, is more serious than Monte Morris. But again, they still beat Memphis, the 8th seed right now in the Western Conference, who's been on the roll recently. Beat them by over 25 points last night, primarily because what Nikola Jokic was able to do and get Michael Porter Jr., who had 32 points last night, the opportunity to dominate at a high level. So I look at all of that, and that's been important too. And when I look at the other candidates, right, the other candidates, people are going to look at that and say, oh, you have to look at the other candidates. I agree. You have to look at them very seriously. So Stephen Curry, right? Stephen Curry has had an unbelievable season. I think definitely an MVP-type season. And I think that he really has shown that he's the best guard in the league, right? He's the top 5 player in the game for sure. I definitely put him in that category, right? It's pretty obvious at this point. However, when I look at his team standings, right? Grant, his team has a winning record when he's there, and they're 1-7 without him, right? So I understand people are going to sit there and say, oh, well, you're being a little hard on Stephen Curry. Okay, fine. But the thing is, unfortunately, even though I think his stats and his impact are overall good enough to get him the MVP, the issue is his team is 10th in the Western Conference. And based on how the MVP goes, it doesn't go to a guy whose team is right now not in the playoff picture. I understand there's the play-in tournament, which I told you guys before on a previous podcast. I find a ridiculous idea that occurred because I think it doesn't reward the regular season success. However, being the 10th seed doesn't really spark to me a guy as an MVP. And I understand he's been the reason they've been able to keep afloat there. But the thing is, they're still 10th in the East, right? Bradley Beal is having an unreal season with Russell Westbrook, right? He's leading the NBA in scoring. But they're 10th in the East right now. So the thing is, I look at that and I say, okay, why isn't he in the MVP case, right? It's a fair point, right? It's a fair point. Now, I know that his team's not, but you can say the Wizards are more talented than the Warriors. And okay, that's fair too. But again, Zion Williamson's putting unbelievable stats, and they have, a better record with him there than without him, right? But he's not in the MVP talks. And that's the problem. Like, Steph Curry's in the MVP conversation because of his overall impact and what he's been able to do. But the reason why a guy like Nikola Jokic gets it over him is because Nikola Jokic has been there for more games. His team has a better record, and his overall impact is better. He has a higher PER, higher assists, higher rebounds, and higher steals too, actually. So I look at all of that and I say, okay, at the end of the day, Nikola Jokic has a greater impact, and his team's winning, right? And for Steph Curry, I understand it's not as fair, right? But I'm not talking about like the fairness. I'm talking about strictly what the facts and stats say and where standings show and what the history of the MVP has given us over time too. So that's how I look at Stephen Curry. Now I look at Joel Embiid, right? Joel Embiid has been unbelievable. I actually have talked about this. I think he's the best big man in the game right now. And people are going to sit there and say, well, why wouldn't you give him the MVP over Nikola Jokic? And it's pretty simple because Philadelphia has done well without Joel Embiid in the lineup. They stayed afloat. They stayed at the 1 or 2 spot without him there. And even though he's better defensively than Nikola Jokic, the thing is, when I look at overall impact, they're very close. But the thing is, I look at the amount of availability the guys have had. Unfortunately, the MVP does go down to availability. It doesn't go down to a guy who plays 48 games in a season because you're not always available to your team, right? And that's what actually unfortunately hurt Joel Embiid when he got that bone bruise in his knee. If that never happened, I think he would be the MVP frontrunner at the moment. But the problem is, since that did happen, and Nikola Jokic, I think, does a little bit more on the offensive end, like getting guys involved. Embiid's a better scorer, but it's not like, heads and shoulders a better scorer. He's a better scorer for sure. It's 30 to 26.4. But again, I look at the overall impact that Nikola Jokic says. He can run the offense very efficiently. And again, he's an incredible passer. And the fact that he's been there more games than Joel Embiid, I think gives him the nod over Embiid. And Giannis has been excellent, but again, the reason why Nikola Jokic is better than Giannis is because the overall impact of Nikola Jokic has been higher. He has a higher PER, higher assists, less rebounds, but not by much. And his team has a better record right now than the Milwaukee Bucks do, actually. So I look at that, and that's a fair point right there, right? Because the Bucks have a 36-23 record, or something around that, and the Nuggets have only lost 21 games in the year, right? The Nuggets have a better record than the Bucks. The Bucks have been inconsistent a little bit. Giannis has kind of been up and down at some points this season too, not always there in terms of health. So again, I look at that overall impact, teams winning, teams being consistent, right? Denver has been consistent all season long. They started off a little rocky, but then since then they've been very consistently at that 4 spot in the Western Conference. And consistency does matter to me, right? How much you're available, how your team does in terms of a consistent basis, the overall impact, right? And Nikola Jokic checks the box in all 3 of those categories. And just to talk a little bit more about Jokic's overall impact, because I think people don't truly appreciate what he does for the Denver Nuggets. People are like, oh, he plays around stars. Okay. Well, I'm going to first make a disclaimer, right? Jamal Murray's an insanely good talent, right? He's a very good player. But he wasn't an all-star this year because he didn't show a level of consistency every game. Michael Porter Jr. really turned on the in terms of his production, increasing later on in the season. However, he wasn't an all-star, right? Will Barton, good player, wasn't an all-star. The only all-star they had on that roster was Nikola Jokic, right? Aaron Gordon came in through the March trade deadline. He wasn't an all-star either, right? The only all-star on that Orlando Magic team he had was Nikola Vucevic. So the notion that he plays with incredible talent, and stuff like that. Yeah, he plays with star players, but none of them were all-stars this year, right? So take that into a factor too. How he got these guys still to be very effective, how their offense is still one of the best in the league. And, pulling up offensive efficiency numbers at this moment, right now, Denver is a top 5 defensive team in the league. Sorry, offensive team. They're the 3rd best offense in the league. So that carries a lot of weight. Giannis, they have the 5th best offense, right? Philadelphia, 14th best offense. Golden State Warriors, 21st best offense. And Phoenix is the 6th best offense. Look, why he deserves it over Chris Paul is because he has better statistics than Chris Paul, and his overall impact has been a little bit slightly better than Chris Paul, because Chris Paul also has Devin Booker, who was an all-star this year. So, unfortunately, Chris Paul does not get the nod, even though I think he's had an unbelievable season. Nikola Jokic is the MVP, and I'm going to look at the fact that he leads his team right now in points, rebounds, assists, and steals. Right? For people saying he's not a great defensive player, he's got good anticipation skills and has good hands where he can get deflections and get steals. He's not a great one-on-one defender. He's not a great defender overall, but he has the ability to anticipate and get steals, and he also can handle the ball so he can run the break himself. And the fact is that he's there every game. The fact is they have basically the same record as the Philadelphia 76ers. And the fact is they're the 4th seed in the West, which is very hard to do, especially because of all the injuries and people being in and out of the lineup, and also getting midseason acquisition trades that had to be acclimated into the fold and into their offensive scheme as well. And he's been able to deal with that very effectively and been able to get the most out of the guys that have been around him, right? So when I look at Nikola Jokic, you have to look at overall impact, right? And I don't care if you guys don't like it or not, overall impact is what goes into the MVP, right? The team's winning. He's there consistently. He leads the teams in points, rebounds, and assists, in steals, right? And he's consistently dominating every game. And the thing is, too, people are going to look and say, okay, Steph Curry beat him twice. Right. But what team has a better record, right? If Steph Curry's team was the 5th seed in the West right now, I would say Steph Curry's the MVP. Right, I'm with you guys. If Joel Embiid played more games this year, he'd probably be the MVP. The issue is their availability. Joel Embiid's availability. Even Curry's been out of the lineup for a while, right? And then also the fact that the Warriors don't have a great record. They're flirting around 500. They're 10th in the West. When you look at all of that, right, that factors into the MVP talks. And whether that's fair or not, it's the truth. That's what the voters have looked at. That's how it's been judged in the past. And that's the way it goes. Now, to explain a little bit more on this, right? The MVP is an award given to the best player on a winning team who has been playing very well on a consistent basis, right? So the reason why like a guy like Harden was in the MVP talks is because he was consistently there for Brooklyn and is consistently playing well, right? When Kyrie and KD and Kevin Durant were not in the lineup, he was consistently putting up incredible triple-double numbers, and Brooklyn was beating all these high-leverage teams. I mean, like Harden literally beat the Phoenix Suns by himself. That's why he was in it. LeBron was in it, for example, because LeBron was still keeping the Lakers afloat in a high level in the Western Conference, even though they didn't have Anthony Davis, they didn't have Andre Drummond at that time, right? So the reason why he was in it is because of his consistency and the way he was playing at his age. It all comes back to the fact that Golden State hasn't won enough games for Steph Curry to be the MVP favorite. He can be in the conversation because his impact has been really good and his statistics are unreal. But unfortunately, whether it's fair or not, his team's record is going to hurt his MVP case, right? And that's just the reality of it. That's the reality, unfortunately, of the MVP race talks. And that's Jokic has been consistent, and he's been, I think, the most valuable player in the league because of the impact he's given to this team on the offensive end. Again, Denver's the third best offense in the league. Third best offense in the league, right? If you want to look at last year's numbers, they were still very good. They were fourth in offense last year, right? And that's because of him. That's because he gets guys open shots. He understands back cuts and how to read defenses. When he gets the ball at the elbow, he understands where the kick pass is to a guy in the corner. And so he gets a lot of assists generated by that, but also the fact that he's a good rebounder. He can score a lot of points. He's a very good three-point shooter and a good mid-range shooter. He does it his way, and again, he's been consistently there. Again, that matters a lot because if you're not consistently there, guys can't trust you and guys can't put you in the MVP conversation if you're not always there because they're going to say, how valuable are you really to your team? Embiid is very valuable, but Philadelphia won without him, and he hasn't been there all the time. Now, again, the Warriors have not been very valuable or very good without Steph Curry. I understand that argument completely. That makes a lot of sense. The issue I see, though, unfortunately, with that argument, and I'm going to repeat it again, is the team's record overall, right? Even though Steph Curry's team, when he's there, the team has a winning record. Unfortunately, they are the 10th seed in the Western Conference at the moment. So it does carry a lot of weight, even for how great he's playing. And he is a top 5 player in the game. There's no disputing that, right? In my opinion, you can't argue with me on that, right? My top 5 are LeBron, KD, Kawhi, Steph, and I probably would have to throw Harden, and then I'd probably put Embiid and Jokic and AD in that kind of lineup, right? So I look at that, and then, you have Giannis too, right? Like, I'm not just saying in that order, but I'm saying, like, those are the guys that round out my top 10, but, Steph's in my top 4 for sure. The 5th spot's kind of open, right? So I get that people are looking at that and saying it's unbelievable what he's doing, and the fact that they're winning when he's there, he should be the MVP. But the problem is his team is still 10th in the West, and they're going to be fighting for a play-in spot, which they're going to get because New Orleans has not been very good and very consistent this year in order to get that spot. But it does matter a lot how you play at the end of the season and how you play overall as a team, right? And he's played very well, but his team hasn't picked up the slack or won enough games, and unfortunately that hurts his case, and that's just the reality of it, and that's why he's not going to win MVP. That's why, and Jokic should win it just because Jokic is having an unprecedented year in terms of statistics. The fact that his PER is number 1 in the NBA, that means that his overall impact has been the greatest anyway, right? So if we look at PER rankings, right? What I'm going to look at for you guys, because this is important, because I want you guys to understand kind of the impact that Jokic is having, right? Everyone's saying, okay, what is this PER thing you keep throwing up because you always do it, right? Well, look, Joel Embiid in 42 games played has the best PER, but since they don't really count that as much, Nikola Jokic has the second best PER. Steph Curry, right? Everyone's raving about him. Steph Curry's 8th in PER, right? So Nikola Jokic's overall impact on the court is higher than Steph Curry's, right? It is, right? And that's the important thing to understand there, right? Is that his impact has been higher, right? Just like that number circles right your impact. Field goal percentage, assists, turnovers, scoring, all the kind of stuff, right? How you make an impact on the game. And the fact is that is a big deal and the reason why he gets it, right? So if I look at that overall, I see that and say, okay, there's no reason why he shouldn't be the MVP. There's no reason, right? And that's kind of the way I look at it. So unfortunately, for people who are really rooting for Steph, and I trust me, I would be too, it's unfortunate because the problem is that you look at this and say, okay, you got to kind of give it to Jokic at the end because Jokic has had a greater greater impact overall based on the PER stats than Steph Curry. And the fact that he's been consistent, the fact that the team's fourth in the West, the fact that his statistics just jump out across the board, I would be very shocked if he didn't win MVP. Very, very shocked. I think he is the MVP, right? I thought Embiid, for example, was the best player during the regular season this year, and he still is. But the problem is he hasn't been healthy. He's only played 42 games, and Jokic has played all 61 games. That's a big factor into the MVP talks, unfortunately. And it's going to go to Nikola Jokic. It's going to go to him, and rightfully deserving. So I look, he's the MVP of the league, and I don't think you can dispute me on that at all. But it'll be interesting to see how this stuff all unfolds because what Steph's doing is really unbelievable. What Joel Embiid is doing is unreal. Giannis is still playing at a really high level again. And I think Chris Paul is a guy that you have to put in there because Chris Paul has really driven the car to the Phoenix Suns' success in a sense, right? He's gotten Devin Booker to unlock his potential, and he's gotten the most out of the young guys in the team too. So I look at all that and I say, okay, Nikola Jokic is the MVP, but those other guys are having incredible years too, right? So that's the way I look at it. Nikola Jokic is the MVP, and that's how I'm going to stand on it. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, but when I come back, we're going to talk about Zion Williamson. He hit 2,000 points before his 80th game, and what makes this guy so special. We're going to talk about that. Also, later on in the show, I'm going to talk about who the biggest disappointment in the NBA has been so far this season, too. And I'm looking forward to talking about those segments when we come back from this commercial break. See you guys in a few.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Michael Shredder. If you missed my last segment, I talked about why Nikola Jokic deserves the MVP title and trophy this season. Later on my show, I'm going to be talking about the hire of Kim Mulkey to LSU women's basketball, as well as the biggest disappointment in the NBA this season. But on this segment, we're going to talk about some great positivity, and that comes with Zion Williamson. Right, I haven't talked about Zion a whole lot on the show, and I'm looking forward to talking about him because he is a real special talent. Now, he hasn't been in the playoffs. He probably won't be in the playoffs anytime soon this year, but he is a special talent. What he's done this year has really been unprecedented. But I'm going to break down the positives of what he's been able to do because, look, I know everyone's glorifying him and thinking that he's like the next great star. And rightfully so. He's got the talent to do that, and he's been putting up incredible stats, one of the most efficient seasons we've ever seen. I get all of that. Those are all fair arguments, in my opinion. Very fair. Now, the coolest thing, though, is that he had his 2,000 point in his 79th game, which is the second youngest player of all time to do that behind Michael Jordan. So, pretty cool company to be in. The fact that he hit it, that's more just the fact of his age of when he hit it, right? The game, again, Will Chamberlain's hit it in 53 games. He's 10th all time with Elgin Baylor and Rick Barry in terms of getting this milestone. So, it's a really cool achievement, right? Obviously, like what he's been able to do this season has really paid off, getting himself in better shape, having, a different role, all this stuff. I'm going to get into that later, but I'm saying that the fact that he got this milestone, also, look, unfortunately, they lost to San Antonio, but again, he had 33 and 14 in that game. I mean, he really put up great statistics and helped them try to get that win, but they didn't. I mean, the good news is they did beat the Clippers the other night by 20, so there is some hope for the fact that these statistics may lead to something in the future. But I want to break down the amazing statistical season that Zion actually has had, because I think it's important for people to get that point across and understand what he's been able to do this season, right? So, look, Zion has been unbelievable, right? He's averaging 26.8 points a game this year on 61.8% shooting. He's averaging 7.6 rebounds, and he's actually third in the NBA in PER, right? So his impact has been the third great highest on his team's offensive numbers this season, right? So he's done an incredible job this season about, just being an efficient player and making the most impact for his team. And like I said before, he achieved that amazing 2,000 points in 79 games with a 33 and 14 point effort in a loss to the Spurs. The other night against the Clippers, he scored 23 points in limited minutes because they blew him out, right? So he's consistently always getting 20 plus on a very high field goal percentage, right? So this is just what he does. This is who he is. The fact is that 85%, a little over 85% of his field goal attempts are in the paint. I heard something that was like 90%. So, it's over 85%. It's unbelievable what he's been able to do. And the fact that he dominates in the paint, that he was an all-star in his second season, and he actually was started in the all-star game because of all the injuries and COVID protocol issues that occurred. But I think the fact is he has really made an incredible jump in his second year, right? First year, he was very good, but out of shape, had injury problems on, limited minutes. But this year, he's been able to play 35 to 40 minutes a night and produce at a high level. So I look at all that stuff and I say, this guy is big time. This guy can really become a great star someday. I would take Luka Doncic still over him. I probably would for the future. But Zion's a guy that at least, you got to put in your top 5 or at least top 3 best players under 22 or under 25 going into the future. Again, I think Devin Booker's really good. Donovan Mitchell's really good. But Zion Williamson just has been pure dominance, right? Again, it's. I think he's in that top 5 somewhere. Where you rank him is up to you, but I think he has that incredible star potential if he just fix a few things. But anyways, I think the really cool thing about Zion Williamson is that he's unique, and I think being unique in basketball is one reason you can differentiate yourself, right? Having a unique skill set, having a unique body type, having a unique level of athleticism, having a unique personality. Right, one reason why Dennis Rodman worked out so well is his personality was unique, and the fact that he had a really unique skill set of just being an incredible rebounder and defender. Right, he was not a great offensive player, but he made the Hall of Fame based on his great defense and his great rebounding. Again, you need guys on that team like that, right? Look at like a Bruce Bowen, right? Bruce Bowen was a great defender, and that was his unique skill set, right? Tim Duncan had a unique skill set of being an incredibly skilled basketball player. You look at LeBron James, unique level of athleticism. Kevin Durant, unique size, athleticism, and skill, right? At 7 feet tall. You look at Giannis, right? Go down the line, right? Unique level of athleticism and mobility at a guy that's 6'11" size, right? So all this stuff gets factored in, and the fact that he's unique is because he's 6'6", 6'7". He plays power forward, and he weighs 280 pounds, has like a 40-inch vertical, and could blow by any guy that guards him. He's strong. He has incredible touch around the rim. And the fact that he can move so quickly, jump so high, and be super explosive on the court while having that much weight on him is really amazing. And the fact that he's not 6'10" either. The fact that he plays like he's 7'2", and he's only 6'6", 6'7". So it's unique, right? It's kind of similar to like a Charles Barkley or Larry Johnson. I think Zion's even more unique in the sense that Zion plays it his way, right? Zion's really just kind of a, go to the paint type of player. Like Charles Barkley could shoot it a little bit. Charles Barkley lived a little bit more in the post. Zion's basically just getting it like either 3-point line, driving it, or 15 feet and in, and just driving to the basket and, jumping into guys and making layups and stuff like that. So I look at that, and it makes a lot of sense why people like this guy for the future, because he has a unique skill set, a unique body type, and a unique level of athleticism to go with that unique body type. And I think that really is going to help the fact that people are going to look at that and say, this is the reason why he could be a great player someday. So I look at that. He's a very unique player. He's got his own style, his own way of doing things, his own body type and athleticism have found a way to really excel his growth in game this season as well. So I look at all that and I say, okay, look, Zion Williamson is a big-time talent, big-time player because of his uniqueness. Another reason, though, is that he doesn't shoot jump shots that much, right? I calculated this morning, like 3% of his field goal attempts are threes, right? So I look at all that, right? It's like less, it's like 3.5 or something like that. So what's crazy about that is the fact that he scores basically all his points in the paint or at the free throw line, but he's only like a 70% free throw shooter. So again, he's leaving a lot of points on the line, but he's getting all his points on layups, and especially a lot of left-hand layups to his strong hand. And that's so different because Giannis does it, but Giannis doesn't do it in the same way Zion does, right? Zion, again, I think if you build a wall against him, he would struggle against that because Zion has the ball in his hands more, but also Zion understands pick and roll, how to roll to the basket and be really effective there. He understands how to get the ball in the post and where he makes a quick rip through and goes to to the paint and lays the ball up. Giannis doesn't really do that the whole time. And then you also look at the fact that he's good at cutting without the ball, right? I think Giannis obviously is a better player than Zion, but Zion is a guy who can move without the ball, cut, and get easy layups too. So, you can wall him off, but again, he does understand basketball enough. He's a smart player where he can find other ways to be effective. He's good on the offensive glass and stuff like that, right? Which makes him a different player because, again, he's not shooting any jump shots. Like, Giannis does shoot jump shots. He's not very good at them, but he does shoot them. Zion doesn't really shoot a whole lot of jump shots. He just drives to the basket, throws his body into you, and gets a layup. Or he dunks over you or goes through you and finishes anyway, right? So it's different because I think the fact that he doesn't shoot a lot of jump shots in a league that's dominated by the three-point shot is very cool, unique, and different. And the reason why I think it's cool is because you have a guy who's basically not fitting into this new era and doing things his way, and it's working, which is really interesting to me. And also the fact that it's unique because there's a unique body type, the fact that he's just really, doing stuff by driving to the basket. And it's very cool because the fact is that this league's a three-point shooting league and has been dominated by the three-point shot ever since Steph Curry really emerged, right? So I look at this and say, Zion Williamson's got a great potential. I mean, the thing about it, guys, right? If you're dominating the league basically just by shooting layups and you're a 6'6", 6'7" power forward, that's pretty cool because you're going against taller guys who are at the rim. I know you have more spacing because three-point shooters, but I'll get into into stuff later. But New Orleans doesn't have a very good three-point shooting team. They're also one of the worst free throw shooting teams in the NBA. So they don't really have a ton of space. It's Zion's playing a lot of times with either Steven Adams, who's not a shooting big, or Willie Herman Gomez, who's not a shooting big either. So the thing is, he doesn't have a lot of space to operate, and he's still putting up these great stats and getting to the rim at will, which shows me his uniqueness and the reason why people are raving about him and everything like that. That's what also makes him so special. I think the fact, too, what's been able to help him out is the fact that he's been more of a point forward this year, too. And what that's allowed him to do is emerge into understanding how to be more effective as a scorer and playmaker. What do I mean by that? Well, I think like you see with LeBron James right now, LeBron James is a point forward, right? He orchestrates the offense, gets guys involved, and then understands where he can get his shots off because he's playing with ball screens a lot more than he had in the past when he was, just coming into the league. And I'm saying, I mean Zion, right? LeBron used a lot of ball screens throughout his entire career, but the fact that LeBron was a point forward allowed him to see the game differently and orchestrate how he wanted things done offensively that were going to work to his team's optimal success level. I'm not at all comparing Zion and LeBron, because LeBron is just way above, I think, right now where Zion is as a player. And also, they're just very unique. It's very tough to compare guys like that because they're just very different kind of players, in my opinion. But I think you look at it and the fact that he understands now, that Stan Van Gundy at least understands that, like, hey, you know what? Zion can handle the ball really well. We can put him in pick and roll situations, get him mismatches on little guards where he can take him to the basket. Again, if a small switches on him, we can take him in the post. He's got, like, you know, that little shimmy going to his left shoulder and comes back over his right shoulder and lays it in with his left hand. He's got that spin move. It's the fact that now Zion's added more to his driving game, which is very important, because the fact is you don't want to just be a guy who's just a 15 feet, just drive by you or post-up guy, right? You want to have the ability to go off ball screens and read ball screens. The fact that also he's a willing passer is important, right? He averages a little under 4 assists a game, but he's a willing passer, right? Like, you know, I've watched him play against the Knicks. I've watched him play plenty of times, and he's a willing passer, right? When he gets, you know, in the paint, it's clogged. He kicks it out to shooters. New Orleans is not a very good three-point shooting team, so that kind of hurts them, unfortunately, in this moment. But they do have he has the ability to at least understand, okay, here's where my shooters are, here's where they can be effective, and here's how I can move forward and try and get these guys better. So if you look at all of that, it makes a lot of sense, because what Zion's doing is understanding that he can play through pick and rolls and play a point forward role. And actually that's gotten the most out of him, because a lot of times mismatches are created, right? And where he can just take a big off the dribble. Because a lot of times actually they put him at a small ball 5 where a center's guarding him. And that's a mismatch issue, right? He's a mismatch issue for a lot of guys in the league because of his size, athleticism, and his pure tenacity, wanting to go score the basketball at the rim. But if you put a center on him, especially a slow-footed center, it's not a great matchup, right? Not a great matchup, because he has a handle and he understands now. He's like, okay, I'm a point forward. I can just go by you downhill, get to the basket, either score for myself or kick it out to a shooter, right? He's getting that kind of experience playing off ball screens instead of just being the roller every time. Because, look, he's the roller and he's very good. He rolls like the short roll area and he just gets it and goes up and dunks. But being able to be the ball handler in that is helping him improve his IQ, his skill level, at least at reading NBA defenses, because I think he's a very smart player, and I think that's really helped him out too. And speaking of skill, that's the next point I wanted to get into, right? Is the fact that people are going to question that, be like, all right, he's scoring a lot of points, but all he does is score layups. I mean, that doesn't take a whole lot of skill. Like, look at Giannis. He's not the most skilled guy. Funny thing is, Giannis is very skilled. Giannis can handle the ball really well. He's got good footwork in terms of spinning around and contorting his body. Giannis just doesn't have a really good jump shot. But Zion has incredible skill. His handle's really good. His ability to control his body in the air, the feathery touch he has in the rim. You look at all this stuff, and that makes me look at that and say, okay, this guy's got a lot of skill to him, right? The fact that he understands the game, how to kick out the shooters, right? If he gets, double teams come. All right, this guy's open in that spot, right? He has a lot of skill. Just because he's not a consistent shooter or a willing shooter at a high level yet doesn't mean he's not skilled. I think his skill actually has improved this year in the sense that he's able to handle the ball more, and that's actually helped his game really transform. And that's the reason why he's shooting 60% every game and putting up 25 to 30 points and everything like that. And that's because his skill set is so high. And that's important. I think the fact also, like, you have to look at his mentality, right? So his mentality is one of, he wants to dominate you at all costs. But I think the fact is, people look at the losing record, they look at their lack of defense in New Orleans, and they blame it on him, right? Okay. I would tend to agree that his defense has not been very good this season, right? It has not been so good since he's come in the NBA, because he's got some bad defensive tendencies. And I understand that argument, and I'm for one, was in support of that argument. He's not good defensively. But that's also coming down to a little bit of inexperience and youth, because he gambles a lot and tries to make the home run play rather than making the simple defensive read and just staying in front of his man, right? So I think the fact is that at 20, he's focused only on winning, right? He doesn't care about his personal statistics unless they amount to winning. He said it's frustrating because he wants to get this team winning and he wants to contribute the most he can to that success. So I understand, the level of determination this guy has, because every basketball player that wants to be great has to have a level of determination to want to win, because you're judged as a great if you win, right? And I think that's what he wants to ultimately be. But I think the fact is that he wants to improve his game, he wants to be coached, and he wants to learn, right? And I think that a lot of 20-year-olds come in, and since they're, coming as a one and done, and they're young, they're just trying, they're trying to just, figure out themselves, right? But I think especially when I've noticed more classes that the guys are coming in and wanting to learn right away. And that's important, right? Because if you're going to want to win a championship, if you're going to make, try to be a big-time playoff powerhouse in the Western Conference, you have to be coachable. And Zion Williamson is coachable. He wants to learn. He wants to get better. He wants to develop his game, right? He wants to find ways to win. And that's his mentality, right? And the fact is, the reality is he hasn't won anything yet, right? He hasn't made the playoffs his first year, and he's not going to make the play-in this year, I don't think. So, yeah, it's a frustrating situation for him, obviously, because he put all this time and effort, and he is upset about it, right? He even expressed to ESPN's Malika Andrews how he's only focused on winning. He's not, he wants to do everything he can to make sure the team wins. And the fact that he's saying that and thinking about that is good. Now he has to put that to reality. But the fact that he has that mindset, like, I want to go win at every chance I can, he's going to try and do his best. Now, he needs to get better defensively in order for that to happen. But offensively, I will agree with this thing. He's been imposing his will on guys way more than he did his rookie year because he's in better shape, and I think his mentality has changed a little bit. It's changed back to that Duke college mindset. But he's not even deferring. He's just doing whatever he has to do to be dominant. Like, he's trying to be a dominant player every single night. Same thing like how Joel Embiid had a different change in his mindset this year. I see the same thing with Zion. And I think that's something that you look at and say, this guy can be special because of this. Because he's 20 years old, he's mature, he understands what he needs to get better at. And he also understands that he wants to win, and he needs to win in order to really preserve his rep as not just being a really good all-star who can't win, right? Kind of like how Bradley Beal, unfortunately, has been the last couple of years, right? And Giannis to a lesser degree, because Giannis' team wins in the regular season. But Zion's got to get to the playoffs first. I think also the fact that he was out of shape and injured for a lot of the games last season, the fact that he got into shape shows me there was a different change in his mentality. Because a lot of guys say that they want to win and don't necessarily do the work to do it, to get to that point. But he has. And I think Zion is special, right? He's a top 20 player in the league. No disputing that, I think. He has an incredible ability around the rim. He's one of the more efficient players we have in the league, and he's having an incredible, incredible season. The things he needs to work on, though, is he needs to definitely get a lot better defensively. I think his defense is not, that strong, especially for how athletic he is and how smart he is. I think his jump shot, I think he doesn't have awful mechanics. I think that his thing is he's a 71% free throw shooter, which is not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad either. So he needs to improve those parts of his game, because that's what's going to, I think, help them win. Because if he can shoot it a little bit, that can open up more spacing for his drive game, and teams can't wall him off when they get to the postseason against him, right? So I look at all of that, and that kind of dwindles it down a little bit, right? But I think what's really cool, and I made this point earlier, is just to see a guy dominate by going to the basket in a league that's dominated by the three-point shot. That's really cool. Really, really cool. So from that overall kind of spiel, I sit there and say Zion's definitely a special talent. Him getting 2,000 points before his 80th game is really, really awesome. And sky's the limit for this guy, right? But he's got to start winning. And I think the third year he's really got to show everyone that he can win and can lead a team to the playoffs, because the Western Conference is loaded, but there's no excuses. You got to be, if you have the talent to do it, you should be able to get in the playoffs. They have the talent to get in the postseason, and they so far have not lived up to their expectations. So he needs to get that team over the hump and get them to that level. And I think that he has the great potential to do it. He just needs to get better defensively and work on his shooting, because everything else is there for him. And actually, I think his rebounding can be a little bit better too, but 7.6 rebounds is not bad. I just think for his athleticism, he could be better, but it's okay. I think overall this guy's special, and we should just recognize him and admire about how great he's been, but also acknowledge the fact that he's got major weaknesses that have been preventing this team from winning and that need to be changed too in order to turn this team around in New Orleans. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, but when I come back, we're going to talk about Kim Mulkey, the new LSU women's basketball coach, former Baylor great women's basketball coach. Talk about her impact, talk about her career at Baylor. And then later on in my show, we're going to talk about who the biggest disappointment in the NBA season has been so far and why I feel that way. So all that coming back up when we come from this commercial break. See you guys very shortly.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Michael Schroeder. If you missed my last segment, which I encourage you guys to go check it out, we talked about Zion Williamson, what makes him so special, because he hit his 2,000 point in 79 games against the San Antonio Spurs a couple of days ago. And we talked about all his special talents, but also talked about what he needs to do to get this team to start winning some games. So we talked about that, and I encourage you guys to check that segment out. Later on in my show, I'm going to be talking about the biggest disappointment in the NBA in terms of team. And it'll be really interesting to see that segment, and I encourage you guys, when we get there, to listen to that segment as well. Now, let's talk about the fact that in women's basketball, women's college basketball, there's been some major shifts going on recently, and specifically with Baylor, because Baylor, for people who forgot, was the victim of that no call that prevented them from not getting to the into the Final Four, and they ended up losing to UConn on that call. And their head coach, Kim Mulkey, decided to leave Baylor and go to LSU, and a lot of people are sitting there questioning it at first, in a sense, like, why would she leave? And there's people who obviously are praising her, obviously. Most people are praising her. But I'm saying there are probably people sitting there and questioning her and saying, wow, why would she leave a school like Baylor? She built into a powerhouse. They're in the Elite Eight last year. You know, they're a top 10, top 5 program every single year. She's been there the last 21 years. But there's more to that. And I'm going to break it down for you guys, talk about why she's going to be a great fit and get LSU back to some sort of relevancy again. And I'm going to break that all down for you guys coming up right now. So a little bit of background on Kim Mulkey, right? Kim Mulkey, as people who follow women's basketball very closely understand, she is an excellent basketball coach. Phenomenal basketball coach. She's the youngest coach ever to get to 600 wins. She got that she got to 600 wins in 700 games. Think about that for a second. Think about how much successful you have to be. You're recruiting, getting players to buy in, the determination, everything like that, right? So she's a 3-time national champion at Baylor, right? Tara Vanderveer just tied her this year when Stanford won their women's basketball championship, which I talked about on one of my earlier shows a couple weeks ago. And she's unbelievable, right? 632 wins and made the NCAA tournament in 20 of her 21 seasons. Think about that. She made the NCAA tournament in 20 of her 21 seasons. That's unbelievable. That level of consistency, that level of dominance, right? That level of getting into the NCAA tournament, actually making runs too. She's been to 6 Elite Eights, 4 Final Fours. So think about it. She's won a national championship in 3 out of the 4 Final Fours she was in. That's unbelievable. That's 75% of the time she goes to the Final Four, they win an NCAA championship. And the thing is, she's only 58, so she's got a lot of coaching still left ahead of her. And like I said before, they were in the Elite Eight this year. Had a great chance to beat UConn. And that was a bad, no call, and it was a controversial call, but there are other things that determined that game, in my opinion. But they got to the Elite Eight and had a chance to go to the Final Four. So again, she built an incredible program at Baylor. And the reason why people are probably sitting there at first and questioning is like, she built a powerhouse at Baylor. She got this team to the Elite Eight this past year. So it wasn't like they were on the downturn or whatever. She left at a period of time when they were still doing incredibly well because of her coaching. And that's fair. That's fair. I get it, right? I get that argument. That's a very fair argument. However, what people are failing to recognize is that it's not just about leaving a program because you want to make more money somewhere else, right? She's going to get a $2.5 million salary basically in her first year. She's going to be paid that amount of money. So people are thinking, oh, it's just because of the money. No, it's not because of that. That's not why. All right, and I'm going to break it down for you guys. She explained, I'm going to be paraphrasing here a little bit, but she basically explained how LSU just felt like the right fit, right? And people sit there and say, well, why did it feel like the right fit? Why did it feel like the right fit for her? Because clearly Baylor was a great fit for her and she was doing great there. Okay, that's a fair argument, but if you listen to the press conference and the speech she gave to LSU people and the press and everything like that and why she wanted to be there, it's pretty obvious, and I think you can't argue with her that her decision made a lot of sense. The fact is, she's from Tickfaw, Louisiana, okay? So she's coming back to her hometown, right? So put that in perspective. Baton Rouge is not necessarily her hometown, but she's coming back to her home state. And she kind of, I'm paraphrasing again here, but she kind of said she's returning back to her roots, her hometown roots. And who can question that, right? The fact that she wants to come back, take on a new challenge, and come back to a place that she, is from and has a great connection with. She even has a street in Tickfaw, named after her. So that just, again, shows you the level of greatness she's had, but also the fact that she's so well connected in that Tickfaw community. And the fact is that she's willing to take on the new challenge because she knows she's going to be in her home state. The fact that she has grown up, obviously, understanding LSU's athletics and everything like that is going to be good for her going forward. And I think the fact is, while the Baylor women's basketball community and fan base is probably very frustrated about this, they have to understand that it's a hometown thing, right? Like going back to your roots and coaching in a place that's, familiar to you as you grow up and in your home state where you get to see your family more, that makes a lot more sense. Also, her son played at LSU baseball, right? She has just a growing connection to that school. And she said she wouldn't have taken any other option if it wasn't LSU, right? If it was any other school, she would have stuck at Baylor. But the thing is, since LSU became available, she wanted to take on the new challenge and go back home where she has her family, right? And no one can fault her for that, right? If you're faulting her for that, that's ridiculous, right? She made a decision based on the fact that she's going to be taking on a new challenge. She's going to be closer to home. And look, she's going to get a lot of money, but that wasn't the reason she took the job, right? A lot of people will take, coaching jobs because of the money, right? You get, if you're a good coach, you get paid a lot of money now. However, that's not what she looked at. She basically said, okay, look, at Baylor, I accomplished a lot. Now I get a chance to go back home and bring that same level of success to LSU, who had a struggling season last year. And I don't think people can look at that and really fault her for that. I personally don't. I personally don't. I mean, people have the right to make the decision they want to make, right? So it's going to be really cool. But to break down a little bit about the program she's going into, I think it's important for people to understand what LSU women's basketball was this year, what they have been recently, and what she brings to this team that I think will turn them into definitely a relevant team in that national championship picture. And I think sooner than people think, too. I think, look, LSU was 9-13 last season, right? They were 6-8 in the SEC conference play. They lost to Texas A&M in the SEC conference tournament. They were 20-10 the year before and didn't make the NCAA tournament, but that didn't happen because there was COVID-19, so they didn't get a chance to play in the NCAA tournament. So there's that angle to it. If you look at this whole idea and this whole argument going on, I want to make something else clear for you guys. Is the fact is LSU was not very good last year, right? They just weren't, right? So just going to a program that got rid of their head coach and is kind of trying to figure out who they are in a sense, find their identity. The good news is that they're bringing in a legendary coach who does understand how to build an identity with the players, how to get players to buy in, and especially when they buy in, they're buying into a successful coach and a successful program, right? That's important, right? 632 wins. Fastest coach ever to get 600 wins, right? 3 national championships, 4 Final Fours, 6 Elite Eights, 20 out of 21 years she was a head coach at Baylor. They made the NCAA women's basketball tournament. All this stuff gets factored in, right? And that's the important thing to understand there. Is, right? They weren't good, right? She's going to a program that wasn't a very top-notch program. And that's an important thing to understand for the viewers out there, is, right? She's going to a program that was not super successful last year, right? They were pretty successful the year before, but they haven't made the Sweet 16 since 2017. And that's as far as they've ever went. They haven't really went any farther than that recently, right? While she's taking teams to Elite Eight, Final Four after Final Four, and everything like that, right? Look, if it wasn't for Gino Auriemma, you might be considering this. Kim Mulkey is one of the, she's definitely one of the greatest coaches in women's basketball history. But you might consider her and like Pat Summitt to be the greatest, right? If Gino Auriemma wasn't there, right? Obviously, I put Pat Summitt and Gino Auriemma above Kim Mulkey, but Kim Mulkey is a top 5, top 3 coach to ever coach women's basketball at this period of time. So just think about that, right? That it's like a Roy Williams, right? And I think what's important for this argument for people to get is that they need to understand, what does she bring to the table? What will Kim Mulkey bring to LSU that will actually turn them into a national championship team, or just at least in the conversation like you just said, Mike? Okay, well, here's the thing. I'm going to tell you before I get into that, like what I kind of value, what I look for when I say a team's going to be a national championship picture. I look for a team that's going to be able to have a consistent, really good offensive defense, be really good in conference play, do a good job in big moments, and make runs in the NCAA tournament, right? Kind of like how everybody would picture a team in the national championship conversation, right? The reason why Kentucky is always there is because they get the top recruits, right? Recruiting also matters a big deal into how you're viewed in the national championship picture. It's why Duke, when they had Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, Cam Reddish, why they were considered to win the national championship, because people were like, look at this really good class, right? So before I dive into what she brings, I wanted to at least make you guys understand this is how I'm thinking about national championship kind of conversation type of team, right? You also have to have a coach. Like if you have a great coach, like a Coach Krzyzewski, a Gino Auriemma, Pat Summitt, a Tara Vandiver, a Kim Mulkey, obviously, or even more on the men's side, you even look at coaches like Mark Few or now Scott Drew and Roy Williams when he was a coach there at North Carolina, and Bill Self, right? This is what I'm talking about, right? You have to be in the national championship conversation because you have either the talent, the coaching, or the kind of pedigree to establish that conversation every year. And that's the way I look at it, right? So now to get in, because that was a little bit of a tangent, to get on into why Kim Mulkey is what she's gonna bring to LSU, and why LSU Tiger fans should be really excited. Well, the one thing about her, if you guys watch the women's basketball tournament, I got a chance to watch a little bit of it, is the fact that she's tough. She's a disciplinarian. She, is no nonsense. She expects a lot. She demands a lot from her players. But while being a disciplinarian, she's also very caring, right? She cares for her players. She cares for their well-being. She wants them to be the best versions of themselves. And if coaches aren't tough on you, that means they don't care, right? And the fact is, she does care. She wants the best out of these players because she recruited them. She wants these players to work out. She wants to win, right? She's very competitive. She's tough and competitive. And that's going to be great going into a SEC conference, if you look at the SEC conference from last season, which I am right now, you look at teams like Kentucky, look at teams like South Carolina, right? You look at teams like Texas A&M, right? Mississippi State, all these kind of teams, right? So you look at Tennessee, you look at Georgia, you look at Arkansas, right? You look at Alabama. Across the line. I mean, this year, Texas A&M was the best team in the conference at 13-1. Then you had South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Kentucky, Arkansas, Alabama, LSU, right? So you have LSU was the 9th seed in the SEC last year. So that's an important argument for people to understand, right? Is that's what kind of gets factored into it, unfortunately. So she's really tough. I think the fact that she's also a winner, right? A winner. And like, I have to rattle off her stats again for you guys. I mean, her credentials, right? 632 wins, 4 Final Fours, 6 Elite Eights, 20 out of 21 years she made the NCAA tournament with the Baylor's women's basketball program. She's the, she is the coach that took the shortest amount of time to get to 600 wins. I'm going to repeat that again. She is the coach that took the shortest amount of time to get to 600 wins. That is unbelievable. You don't realize how hard it is to win in college basketball, especially when you're rebuilding a program, right? That's why it took Scott Drew so long to get this Baylor team to the national championship, right? Because it's hard. It's really hard. It's a very difficult kind of process to go through and try to get to that level, right? And the fact is, her players bought in. They buy into her system. They understand what it takes to win because she instills that mindset because she's competitive, like I said before, with her toughness and competitiveness. She wants to win. And the thing is, she is a winner. She's one of the greatest coaches to ever coach women's basketball. And that's because of the fact of like what she can bring to a program in terms of her discipline and toughness, but also the fact that she has incredible credentials that you have to trust her on her word because she's won so many games and won multiple national championships that LSU has not had the chance to have yet. So that's another point there is that she's a winner. The third point is that she's a good recruiter, right? She gets a lot of the top players from high school to go to Baylor when she was the coach there, and that's important, right? You want to have a good recruiting class each year because that helps develop a sort of rap and a sort of reputation of greatness, of success, and allows you to put your mold into these young women who get to want to aspire to play professionally either in the WNBA or overseas. You get to establish that kind of pattern of winning and toughness if you get a good recruiting class who can mold into that system, who's also talented enough to get and be competitive with the top teams in the country that Baylor did go against, right? And LSU is going to be going against great teams too. Texas A&M was really good this year. So was South Carolina. South Carolina was in the Final Four this year, right? So you have to look at that and definitely understand that, this coach is for real. She's no joke. And she knows how to recruit and she will, get a lot of the top ranked recruits there just because of her reputation, her name, the fact that she's a caring coach, the fact that she's won, right? The fact that she had just had success this year going to the Elite Eight, right? So that's an important thing to understand. The fact is that she also builds character. This is another point I'm going to make for you guys. She does build character. She has built successful players. She's very caring, right? She was a perfect example of how caring and supportive she was for Brittany Griner, right? Because Brittany was getting, scrutinized for the media just for being a top player and everything like that. And she was there for her, right? She's been there for her players as they've went through some, some scrutiny because Baylor was always under a little bit more of the media microscope in women's basketball because they're one of the top programs, right? UConn, South Carolina, Stanford, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Mississippi State for a bunch of years. All this gets boiled down to the fact that she does build character. She builds a toughness with these girls. She cares for them. So the fact is that she builds women that come in, 19 years old, aspiring to be great, and she builds that toughness, that self-confidence, that will to be a great player, right? That's what great coaches do, and that's what she's going to do at LSU. I think she understands that her players come first too, right? And understanding that is the key for her, I think, to win over a lot of these players in the locker room. And she's going to win them over because of her credentials, her toughness, and just getting good players in the program. But the fact that she's going to put them first, they're going to feel a good bond with the coach. And a lot of Baylor coaches have had nothing but respect in terms of that bond they have with Coach Mulkey. And that is important when you're trying to build a new culture and a new program that hasn't had as much success recently as the program you just left. But the thing is, too, is that having characters, the fact that, look, she's had talented teams with the highest level recruits for a long time. But they understand how to overcome adversity, right? They understand how to get to a high level because they can overcome it, use their talent appropriately, fight through adversity. Because in order to be a champion, you got to fight through adversity, right? Talent is just not good enough alone, right? And the fact is that she knows how to build that character within them, these players, and get the most out of them to use their talent effectively, shows you exactly why LSU is going to be in a good spot going forward. And people should look at this with major excitement, right? It's really exciting because she's going to get the most out of these players. She's going to build a great culture. She's going to demand a lot. But the important thing for people to get, though, is that she is going to expect a lot, but she's going to care for the players, put them first, and build character to make them stronger mentally, stronger physically, more skilled and more developed basketball players. And the fact is she's going to develop them into winners because she's going to build that character within them because she's going to put them first, right? But she's going to be there as an outlet if they ever need anything too, and support them when they are under duress by the media, right? Or under duress by opposing teammates or opposing fans, right? So, because again, when you're a top coach and you're going to be under more media coverage, you're going to be under more fan scrutiny, you're going to be the target of a lot of teams that are going after you, right? So she's going to build that character within this team and get them to that level. And look, I think she will get this program back to relevancy. I think she's going to get them back relatively soon because she knows how to turn around a program very quickly. She did it at Baylor, right? So I look at this and say, yeah, she's got a great opportunity to really do a lot of great things. And I'm excited to see what she does. I mean, I think she's one of the greatest coaches to ever coach. And I think her going to LSU because she wants to be closer to hometown and take on a new challenge, I think LSU's going to thank her because I think she's going to really turn this program around, and I think sooner than people think too. And that's the way I go on this segment. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, guys, but on my last segment, we're going to talk about the biggest disappointment in the NBA this season. It's going to be a really fun segment. I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait to share it with you guys, and it'll be really fun to get into that segment as we go into that last segment of the show. I will see you guys very, very soon after this commercial break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Michael Schroeder, and if you missed my last segment, I talked about Kim Mulkey, the famous head coach for Baylor women's basketball, deciding to leave Baylor and go back to her hometown state and coach the LSU Tigers as their new women's basketball coach. It's a really interesting story, and if you didn't get a chance to listen to that segment, I encourage you to do so. Now, this segment, guys, is going to be really exciting. We're going to talk about the biggest disappointment in the NBA this season, right? I've talked about my top 5 teams and my MVP candidates and who's better than who in terms of guards, but I haven't had a chance to really talk about who the biggest disappointment this season has been. right? There's a whole lot of teams you can put into that conversation. Boston Celtics, Miami Heat, Portland Trail Blazers, New Orleans Pelicans, Washington Wizards, Sacramento Kings. I mean, look, there's a lot of teams you could put in there. I mean, you could also even say Dallas has been kind of disappointing a little bit too, but even though they've played much better recently, there's a lot of teams you could put into that conversation. But I am going to say the New Orleans Pelicans have been the biggest disappointment this season. I expected more from them, and they have not shown me that they are ready to take that next step. I just praised Zion Williamson earlier. I think he's great, but he's the reason why they haven't been doing well either. Right? There are things in his game that have prevented this team from doing well. Offensively, he's the reason why they actually have been really good offensively, but defensively, he's also contributing to their horrible defense. So I'm going to break down why they've been the biggest disappointment of the NBA season, in my opinion, and what they need to do to fix it and not become a disappointment, and in order to become a playoff team, be relevant in the Western Conference, actually maximize their potential in terms of the young talent they have, and actually start winning games. So let's get started, guys. Let's get started. And the New Orleans Pelicans, guys, so here's the problem. Zion's taken the next step in his game, right? He went from a good rookie year, but a lot of really high skepticism because of his injuries, his weight and conditioning. But he's taken the next step, right? Becoming an all-star, third in PER, 26.8 points a game, 7.6 rebounds. I already relayed that earlier when I talked about the Zion segment, which I encourage you guys to check that out as well. But here are the problems. They're 27th in defensive efficiency, so they don't play any defense. They're 26th in opponents' points allowed, so they're allowing a lot of points. They're 20th in opponents' field goal percentage, so they're not making these guys shoot bad percentages. So to put into context, right, there's 30 NBA teams, right? If you're first in these categories, you're very, very, very good at the defensive categories, right? So right now, they're the third worst defense in the NBA, or I guess fourth worst, because you have 28th, 29th, and 30th, right? So the fourth worst defense. They're the fifth worst in opponents' points allowed, and they're, in the bottom 10 of field goal percentage. Their problem also is they don't know how to hold on to leads. They're 19th in clutch scoring. They get these big leads, and then they can't guard anyone, and they don't execute their plays, and they end up blowing big leads to teams they really shouldn't be losing to. I'll give a perfect example. I'm a Knicks fan, right? I love the way the Knicks have been playing. Unfortunately, they lost to Phoenix last night, but that's a different story for a different day. But the Knicks should not have beaten the Pelicans recently. And the Pelicans had that game won, but the Pelicans made turnovers, bad shots, mistake after mistake down the stretch, and had a lapse in defensive judgment at the end of the game that led to an open Reggie Bullock three to tie the game and send it to overtime, where the Knicks eventually prevailed. And that's a problem. They don't have they're not very good in the clutch. They're terrible defensively, and they don't execute plays. And it's gotten Stan Van Gundy obviously very upset, but I think it's a combination of the fact of all this stuff, coaching, players, everything. I'm going to break all that down in a second later, but let's also talk about the fact that they're 23rd in three-point shooting. 23rd in the league in three-point shooting. I talked about this earlier. This is why I think Zion is easier to guard, because the team doesn't have spacing. They have Steven Adams down low, who's not a three-point shooter. They have Lonzo Ball, who's an inconsistent three-point shooter. Brandon Ingram, who can... I'll correct that. Lonzo Ball's a good three-point shooter. I'll actually say that. He's a good three-point shooter. He's really improved that part of his game. But Brandon Ingram's a guy who can hit threes, but he likes to shoot more mid-range, right? And the other guys in their team are just not consistent shooters. Eric Bledsoe, not consistent. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, not consistent. Josh Hart, not consistent. And that's a problem, right? They just don't have enough three-point shooting to space the court. And I'm going to relay this again. The NBA now is a three-point shooting league, and it has been since Steph Curry really emerged as one of the top players in the league because of his three-point shooting, right? And that's the way it is. That's unfortunately the way it is. And whether that's fair or not, it's the truth, right? And the problem is the Pelicans can't shoot threes at a very high level. They're also 29th in free throw percentage at 73.3. It's because of Zion, who's 70%, And Steven Adams, who also gets fouled a lot, shoots the ball at 44% from the free throw line. And I'll get into Steven Adams later on this segment as we break down the Pelicans even further. But that's a major problem they have. And that's that's not good. Right? And the problem is, too, is they have 5 guys who average double figures in their team. 5. Right? That's really good. You have 5 guys who average double figures. That's excellent. That's excellent. But it doesn't amount to any wins, right? And actually, what's funny is they're 9th in assists per game, 9th in the league in assists per game because they move the ball pretty well offensively at times. And they're actually 9th in offensive efficiency, too. So their offense is not the problem always. In the clutch it is because they don't know how to hold on to leads and they sometimes just forget their execution. A lot of the game, they're great at moving the ball around and getting great shots and being effective offensively. But then the problem is, as they continue to move down the games and when they have these big leads, they squander it very easily. And they have a lot of youth and inexperience, right? I'll be the first one to say they have a lot of youth and they have a lot of inexperience, right? They haven't, and I've talked about them before, and I've just discussed this with people I know, friends of mine, everything like that, but they just have a maturity issue, right? And Zion's taking the next step. Brandon Ingram's a really good player. Lonzo Ball, I like him a lot too. Eric Bledsoe's a good piece, and they lose leads all the time. All the time. They had probably 10 to 15 games this year they could have won, and they just blew leads. And they're 20th in turnovers, right? So that causes a lot of these issues down the stretch. They turn the ball over a lot. A lot of teams take them out of their offense because of that. They have that's a problem with transition defense too. And if you think about it, right, I'm gonna just give you guys a little bit of a statistic there, right? If you're 20th in turnovers, right? If you're 20th in turnovers, the problem is you're allowing the team to get a lot of opportunities in transition, right? Which opens up more threes, easier buckets for guys who are struggling during the game. And if you look at these statistics, right, we can go down the line, right? This is transition is very important, right? Transition is incredibly, incredibly important. And you look at, the Pelicans just are bad in every statistical category, right? They're bad in every statistical allowed. Again, their only thing they're really good at is rebounds allowed because they're a big team. But the thing is, field goals allowed, they're 18th, they're 29th in 3 points allowed. They're 24th in blocks because they don't really protect the rim. Turnovers, they're 22nd. I mean, like their defense is just horrible. They're great on rebounding, but they're horrible. They're horrible at everything else, right? Points allowed, they're 26th. I mean, like I said before, they're just really bad defensively. Defensive rating awful to set 27th, right? Opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Like I said before, they're 28th in that, and opponents' field goal percentage, they're 20th in that. And again, when you turn the ball over too much, right, and then you can't stop anyone, you're not going to be good when you holding on to big leads, right? If you turn the ball over a lot, give teams extra opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and you're also just a poor defensive team, which I thought Stan Van Gundy would fix, but clearly that's not working with this team. So I look at that argument and I say, okay, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. That doesn't work. And yeah, unfortunately, that's their problem, right? They have a lot of youth and experience. I mean, also the fact is their free throw percentages are terrible. I mean, 73.3% of people are like, oh, it's not that bad. It's 29th in the NBA because people can shoot the ball better now, right? Because it's a 3-point shooting league. If you can't shoot, you can't really. If you're not an athlete, you got to be able to play. In order to play in the NBA, my apologies. In order to play in the NBA, you got to be able to hit threes if you're not like a star player, right? You have to, right? Or like be a great utility player. Again, the Pelicans got some good good free throw shooters. Lonzo Ball, 78%. Josh Hart's 77.5%. Look, they do a lot of things interesting well, but I mean, even Brandon Ingram's 88.6%. But unfortunately, the other guys on their team who, Zion and Steven Adams, who get a lot of their free throws attempts, are not great free throw shooters, right? Not great. And that hurts the Pelicans, right? And again, their offensive execution at the end of games is poor. And again, they are, like, I just rattled off a bunch of stats for you. They are just terrible in every defensive category. So when you guys are trying to build a big lead, they were able to keep it last night against the Clippers, but they can't stop anyone. And I mean, I'm just going to give you their last couple games just for understanding how bad their defense is. And I thought this was going to change. Again, they were bad defensively last year, but I thought with Stan Van Gundy, a defensive-minded coach who really built a good team in Orlando, they would be able to get over the hump, right? Defensively, right? They would be able to start buying in and getting better at that side of the court. Well, that didn't happen, right? Think about it, right? They allowed 134 points to the Nets on April 20th. Then they played good defense, but the Magic are terrible. Then they allowed 110 points, which is not bad. It's not good either. It's not really that good. And then they allowed 103 to the Clippers. But we're going to go back to a few games back, right? Just an understanding of like how bad their defense has been this season. It's been awful. It's been awful, right? It's been very, very bad, right? So I'm just going to give you guys a perfect example. So we're going to start in the month of April, right? The month of April, 115 to Orlando, 126 to Atlanta, 115 to Houston, 123 to Atlanta, 139 to Brooklyn, 101 to Philly, 94 to Philly, 109 to Cleveland, 110 to Sacramento, 116 to the Knicks, 117 to Washington, 122 to the Knicks, 134 to Brooklyn, 100 to Orlando, 110 to San Antonio, and 103 to the Clippers. This is what I'm saying. I thought they were going to take that next step in that department. Clearly have not done that. Clearly have not worked on and got better at that defensive side. And look, I know practices are limited. They haven't had the opportunity to be in practice as much and practice those schemes. But yeah, they're just a very poor defensive team. And that's how it is. It's youth and inexperience, I think, not buying into Stan Van Gundy either. Right? So another couple of reasons why I think that they've been the biggest disappointment this year is a couple of reasons, right? A couple of reasons I look at them and say, okay, this is the reason why they have been a major, major disappointment. And the reason I'm going to go into number one is that I believe that Stan Van Gundy was going to work, right? I was actually, when the news came out that he was going to be the coach, I actually thought it was a good hire. A lot of people did not think it was a good hire. I thought it was a pretty good hire. I ideally thought that either Tyronn Lue or Kenny Atkinson would be a better fit. Or even a Mark Jackson, too, because Mark Jackson has done well with younger talent as a head coach. But I thought Stan Van Gundy, the fact that he got Orlando to the finals and made them a relevant team, and even with the Pistons, they were a playoff team a lot of the years he was there. They just didn't have a great record, but they weren't bad defensively until toward the end of his tenure there. But the fit hasn't worked. Their defense is terrible again, and they have a lot of issues offensively at the end of games, and unfortunately, they just make a lot of bad reads defensively. And I'm not sure if that's not the guys buying into Stan Van Gundy. I'm not sure if it's the youth and inexperience. Excuse me. And I thought Stan Van Gundy would be a better fit. Now I've heard that he's a little bit too negative. Okay, fine, but the fit hasn't seemed to work in the way I thought it was going to, unfortunately. And that's kind of the way it's kind of transpired, unfortunately, for that whole dilemma. Zion has great stats, and I highlighted those in my earlier segment when I talked about the greatness of Zion Williamson. But unfortunately, his lack of defense and his lack of consistent or any sort of outside shooting hurts the Pelicans, because they don't have a lot of spacing. The Pelicans are 29th in free throw percentage, and they're 23rd in three-point percentage. So the issue is they don't have a ton of spacing. So the problem is he wants to clog up the lane, and him and Steven Adams are in the lane a lot. The fact that he's not consistent enough, that's why teams can sometimes wall him off. And if they play in the playoffs, that's a problem. And also, look, I understand he's putting up unbelievable numbers every night, and I get that. He's that good. But the problem is he needs to develop that at least a 15-foot jump shot. Same thing with like Giannis, right, and Ben Simmons. Get a 15-footer down first before you start trying to be a three-point shooter. He can shoot threes, but I think he needs to shoot them more, because you need to keep the defense honest, right? If guys are starting to come out to you, then they can't wall you off, and then you can get in the lane, do what you do best, right? And the thing is, look, he plays with great effort, right? Something which I think he didn't do that well last season because he's in better shape and has more of a tenacity about him. But his defense, because he gambles too much on defense, has not been very good. I think his shot blocking has not been to the level I thought it was going to be, because in college he was really good at that. And the problem is, even though his stats are unbelievable, they're not translating to wins. But I'm giving him more of a break with that because LeBron James had unbelievable stats in his second year, and they didn't necessarily translate into that team making the playoffs either in Cleveland. But they made a major jump from the year ago. In New Orleans, they haven't really made a major jump, which is why the third year for Zion is the big year. If they continue to be like this during his third year, I'm going to start trying to think if it's really him that needs to start changing the way he approaches the game. Not from an offensive standpoint, besides maybe shooting, but I think defensively, I think he needs to change the way he approaches it. And because he had, against the Knicks, actually, ironically enough, he actually, as Julius Randle had 37 points on him, he actually held Julius Randle to a not great shooting percentage. Best defense I've seen him play all year. And I think if he consistently did that, the Pelicans would be in a better spot, because I think he's the guy a lot of guys look at, right? And I think that if he does that better, they can be in better shape. And look, he's a top 20 player in the game, but again, he needs to average more than 7.6 rebounds. He needs to get his free throw percentage up to 75%. And I think he can get more assists. Unfortunately, the team's not a great three-point shooting team, so that could also contribute to the reason why his assists are so low. But I think also just kicking out to guys more, pacing yourself and being a little bit more patient is stuff he needs to improve in his game. I think the fact is he still has a high level of turnovers at that period of time. And I think also if you look at the fact that he's not a great free throw shooter, he gets there a lot, right? He's not an excellent rebounder. That kind of hurts. Even though they're really good as a rebounding team in terms of not allowing opponents to get a lot of rebounds against them, my problem always stems down to the fact that he's just not a great outside shooter, and he gambles a lot and isn't great defensively. And that contributes to why they are a poor three-point shooting team and very poor defensively. So that's a problem there. The third reason, though, is Steven Adams' impact. He has just not been very impactful, in my opinion, compared to what I thought he was going to be. Those numbers, 7.8 points, 9 rebounds, they would be good for, a decent center in the NBA. I consider Steven Adams, before he got there, to be one of the better centers in the NBA. In OKC, he made his name for himself, right? Being a guy who can get 10 to 13 points a night, a guy who can get you, 9 to 10 rebounds, a block, physical, a guy you could win with. I thought the Celtics should have really invested in him, because I thought he would have been a great fit. Still do, to be honest with you. But I thought that was going to get the Pelicans to be the 8th seed in the West. I thought that they got a guy that finally is going to bring some defensive tenacity and a guy that can bring some more scoring. He unfortunately has not been that. He's been down in basically every statistic except for field goal percentage. He went down from points from 10.9 to 7.8. Rebounds went down from 9.3 to 9. Blocks went down from 1.1 to 0.7. Free throw percentage went down from 58.2% to 44.4%. That's a big problem, right? And the thing is, I expected more from him because he's a guy that's been around the league a lot. He's been through the OKC winning ways and also like their semi-rebuild with Chris Paul. And he knows how to win. He knows how to get to those spots. And the thing is, he does know how to score and make impacts on the defensive end too. And he just hasn't done that. And this has been like one of the worst years, the last 5 years at least, of his career. And I'm surprised to see him playing so poorly. And just with not as much of an impact as I expected, because I thought he was going to add a major impact to the New Orleans Pelicans. And I'm disappointed to see that he hasn't really done that. And because I like his game. I love Zion. I think that he and Steven Adams could have played well together. I mean, there's not as much spacing. But I think the fact that, Jackson Hayes has been, inconsistent. Willie Herman Gomez, you really want to go with him. But I think that, he's just been down every stat. I thought at least if his rebounds were around the same, his points went down no problem, not a big deal to me. But his free throws went way down, his blocks went down. I thought those are big issues there that I just personally had an issue with when I watched the Pelicans or have watched the Pelicans this year. Because I expected more from Steven Adams because he's been a guy who's been around, has been on an OKC team that's been winning when he's there, and he's been making major contributions there. I just expected more. And that's been kind of disappointing to see that he hasn't quite lived up to the expectations I expected. Overall, look, they've been really disappointing. I thought they were going to be an 8th seed in the Western Conference this year. Clearly, I was wrong on that. And they just don't play great defense, and they're just too young and inexperienced and immature at this moment in time. And I don't think Stan Van Gundy's been fitting well with that team either. So they've been the biggest disappointment in the NBA so far, and that's where I leave it. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. We all really appreciate it. GSMC Podcast Network. Please like this. So please like our social media and follow us as well. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, GSMC Basketball. Also, subscribe to us on the different podcast platforms you listen to podcasts. We really would appreciate that. And also, again, leave a comment for anything you guys want to hear us talk about in our next episodes coming up in these next couple weeks. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Michael Schroeder from the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.